Hey guys, this is Mr. Grice for Algebra 2, Unit 4.5 Notes, Day 3. Today we're going to be talking about solving equations by using the quadratic formula. Our learning target today is to be able to solve quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. So, if you forgot what the quadratic formula is, I'm going to write it down right over here. And not only am I going to write it down, I'm going to sing it for you. Okay? So, just remember, pop goes the weasel. All right, so x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. And there you go. That's it right there. Now, when we're doing the quadratic formula, remember that it's got to equal 0. So when I'm looking at number 1, it doesn't equal 0, guys. So that's when we have to look at our leading coefficients and move the smaller one, okay? So we're going to subtract 8x squared to both sides, okay? Add the 4x, add the 4x. This way everything on the left side equals 0. 17 minus 8, we get 9x squared. The negative 4 and positive 4 cancel, 25. So we got 9x squared minus 25 set equal to 0. Now, that's a quadratic binomial with subtraction, and those are both perfect squares. We can do square roots, okay? So the square root of 9x squared is 9x, or is 3x, I'm sorry. The square root of 25 is 5. And remember, one's a positive, one's a negative, okay? So remember, we could do quadratic formula there, but I think it's a lot easier to solve this. Everything with the variable gets set equal to 0, and then we solve. We would subtract the 5 to both sides, divide by 3. Add the 5 to both sides, divide by 3. So we get our two answers of x equals negative 5/3 and positive 5/3. Okay, so some of these we're going to be able to do quadratic form equation, other ones are quadratic formula, other ones we're going to be able to factor, and we just got to pay attention to that. Okay, so once again we look at the leading coefficients and we move the smaller one. So I'm going to subtract 2x squared to both sides, add the 6x. So on the right side we get 0. 3 minus 2 is 1, so we get x squared. Negative 8 plus 6 is a negative 2x, and negative 5. So I always like to see, can I factor this? So numbers that multiply to get to negative 5 and add to get to negative 2. So I'm looking at the factors of 5, which are just 1 and 5. And no matter what we do, there is no combination that works. So we need to write down what is A, what is B, and what is C. Okay? And then we get to do the quadratic formula. So x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So we have b negative 2a times c, all divided by 2a. So the first part that we do is what's underneath the square root. Okay? So we have negative 2 squared. Remember, we're just doing the part underneath the square root. So negative 2 squared minus 4 times A times C. And we get 24. Okay. And then we take the square root of 24 and we want to break that down into the perfect squares. So what's the highest perfect square that goes into 24? 4. Square root of 4 and square root of 6. Square root of 4 is 2, so we're left with 2 square root 6. Okay, and then we're going to break it up. What do we break it up to? Well, 2 divided by 2, and then we leave it 2 square root 6 divided by 2. To get our final answer of x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 6. Okay, and that's one like we did the other day. All right, so number 3, let's go ahead and get started. Figure out which one you want to move. Go ahead and pause the video, and good luck. Okay, so you should have gotten y squared minus 4y minus 5. Now, once again, I would always check to see, can you factor this? Because we're looking for numbers that multiply to get to negative 5, add to get to negative 4, and we can actually do that. That's 1 and 5, but the 5 is negative. So we can split that middle term to get y squared minus, plus 1y minus 5y minus 5 and factor all of this, okay? So I'm going to move this and I'm going to factor it all over here as we start splitting that middle term. We draw the line. We take the factor of the first group, which is y, the factor of the second group, which is a negative 5, and we get y plus 1 and y plus 1. So we did it right. We get y plus 1 and y minus 5. So we get y plus 1, y minus 5, and then we set each one of those equal to 0. And when you solve them, you should get your two answers of negative 1 and positive 5. Okay, so looking at our leading coefficients, move the smaller one, which is the 2y. Good, the 2y squared. So I subtract 2y squared to both sides. I'm adding the 5y to both sides. Those cancel. We're left with 0 equals 10y squared. And oh my gosh, those cancel too. So 10y squared plus 2. Now, it's a quadratic binomial, but it doesn't have subtraction. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to use the quadratic formula. A equals 10. B, is there a B term right here? No, so it's 0. And then C equals 2. X equals the opposite of B. Well, the opposite of 0 is just 0. Plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC. Well, once again, B is 0. Then we have a 10 and a 2. All divided by 2A. Okay, so we're still doing the same thing. Okay, now if I have a 0 out front, I have nothing, so it's just plus or minus. Okay, the bottom is 20, we should know that. Now we have 0 squared, so if you really want to type in, oh, I wonder what 0 squared is, go ahead and find out. Minus 4 times 10 times 2. And we get negative 80. Okay, so we need to go off to the side and find out what is the square root of negative 80. It's negative, so right away I know that there's going to be an I in there. And then we've done 80 multiple times, guys. It's 16 and 5. So the square root of 16 is 4i square root 5. So now we have x equals plus or minus 4i square root 5 divided by 20. So the only thing left to do is to reduce. And when we reduce that, we get x equals plus or minus 2. Oh, don't forget your I, Mr. Grice. I'm going to put it in another color so I don't forget it. I square root 5 all divided by 5. Okay, and I don't reduce the 5, the square root, or the square root 5 and the 5 because those are not like terms. Okay, so I can't do it. All right, let's go ahead and flip it over. Number 5. Go ahead and get the variable, or set it equal to 0. Good luck. Okay, so we get m squared minus 13m plus 40. Remember, always check. Can you solve it by factoring? Do you know all the factors of 40? 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, 5 and 8. And then it's 5 and 8. But for it to work on the bottom, it's got to be negative 5 and negative 8. And guess what? It works for both. So we have m squared minus 5m minus 8m plus 40. And then we take the GCF of the first group, which is an m, the GCF of the back group, which is a negative 8. So I have m and negative 8. Guys, I'm doing this quick because you should be able to do this. Okay, so we get m minus 5 and then m minus 8. So my next steps, m minus 5, m minus 8, and then everything with a variable I set equal to 0. So my answers are m equals 5 and m equals 8. Okay. So looking at my quadratic terms, I'm going to move the smaller one, which is the m squared. So I'm going to subtract m squared to both sides, subtract the 7 to both sides, and we get that 0 equals 3m squared plus 6m plus 11. So are there any numbers that multiply to get to 33 and add to get to 6? No. So that means quadratic formula. A equals 3, B equals 6, and C equals 11. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write down the equation see if you guys can fill in the missing terms and then tell me what that guy is. Oh, that's not how it looks, plus or minus. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and good luck. Okay, so you should have gotten the square root of a negative 96, and then I got to come over here and break that down. So the first thing I notice is that it's negative, so I'm going to take out an I. And when I've got 96, I go, well, 81 would be the next one, then 64, then 49, then 36, nope, 25, nope, 16, there we go. Okay, so this breaks down to the square root of 16 and the square root of 6. The square root of 16 is 4i square root 6. Okay, and then we plug that back in. So x equals negative 6 plus or minus 4i square root 6, all divided by 6. I know, that's a lot of 6's. Okay, so we break it up. We've got negative 6 divided by 6, and then we've got 4i root 6 divided by 6. Negative 6 divided by 6 is negative 1. 4 divided by 6 is actually 2, so we have 2i square root 6. And that 4 divided by 6 is 2/3. All right, number 7. Set everything equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract the 8w to both sides. I'm going to subtract the 4 to both sides. So I get 0 equals 5w squared minus 18w minus 8. Okay, so check. Are there any numbers that multiply to get to negative 40 and add to get to negative 18? I'm going to go up here real quick because we just did it. Do you see what I'm talking about up here? Yeah, it's 2 and 20. Okay. So it's, positive 2, negative 20. Positive 2, negative 20. Make sure they work in both, and then you guys can go ahead and factor. So we get 5w squared plus 2w minus 20w minus 8. So go ahead and factor that, and I'm going to meet you back over here when you have the two binomials. Good luck. Okay, so you should have gotten 5w plus 2 and w minus 4. So everything with a variable, I'm setting equal to 0 and solving. So like the one on the right, we get add 4 to both sides, w equals 4. The one on the left, we would subtract 2, and then we would divide by 5. Okay? So we get w equals negative 2 over 5 and positive 4. All right, last one. What do you want to move? Yeah, I would move the 2w squared minus w, and we are adding 8. So add 8. So the right side equals 0, and then we get 4w squared, the w's cancel, plus 9. Now you have to be careful, because this is a quadratic binomial, and they are perfect squares, and you might want to go like, oh, I'm going to take the square root of everything. But we can't, because it's addition. Okay, so the only way to do this is through square root, or not through square roots, I just told you you can't. It's through the quadratic formula. Okay, so we get x equals the opposite of b, well it's 0, okay, plus or minus the square root of 0 squared, sorry I did 0 squared minus 4ac, okay, so we'll start filling that in, 4ac all divided by 2a. So x equals plus or minus the square root. 2 times 4 is 8, and so now all we have to do is that bottom part, which was 0 squared minus 4 times a times c. And we get negative 144. So we've got to take that negative 144 and find out what the square root of it is. Now the first thing that I notice is that it's negative and it's an I. And if you look at it, 144 is on our list. We should know what the square root of 144 is, and that is 12. Okay, so it's actually 12i, and I'm going to put the 12 out in front. So x equals plus or minus 12i divided by 8, and then we just reduce the fraction. 12 over 8 is the same thing as 3 over 2. Just don't forget that I. I'm going to make that look a little bit nicer. So we have plus or minus 3i divided by 2. And that's it. Now, your homework is 4.5, practice C. If you have any questions, please come see Ms. Carranza or myself. We would love to help you out. Otherwise, this is Mr. Grice signing off. Thanks for watching.